Mira knelt by the riverbank, her hands trembling as she examined the unconscious man sprawled on the wet ground. His chest rose and fell faintly, blood seeping through a gash on his side. She whispered a prayer, her heart pounding, and gently turned him over, revealing his chiseled face etched with pain. A warrior's mark adorned his forehead, and his hand clenched a broken spear. Mira hesitated, scanning the forest edge, but the dense trees revealed nothing. Her instincts screamed to leave, but his labored breathing pulled her back. Summoning courage, she ripped her shawl, pressing it against the wound to staunch the bleeding. "Stay with me," she whispered, eyes darting between him and the thickening fog. Mira's father had always warned her about the forest tribes, fierce and unforgiving, but this man was barely alive. She wrapped his arm over her shoulder, dragging him to her cottage hidden in the clearing. Inside, she laid him on her bed, wiping his feverish brow and mixing herbs as her mother had taught her. All night, she fought sleep, feeding him broth, whispering stories of resilience, as if her words alone could tether his soul. By dawn, his eyes fluttered open, deep, piercing, and filled with both agony and gratitude. He tried to speak, but pain silenced him. Mira offered a sip of water, and he nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. As daylight filtered through the windows, she dared to ask, "Who did this to you?" His lips parted, but a distant war cry broke the silence, sending chills down Mira's spine. She rushed to the door, but the forest remained still. When she turned back, the man had managed to sit up, determination lighting his gaze. He pointed toward the forest, muttering a word that sent a shiver through her. Hunters. Realizing the danger wasn't over, Mira barred the door, her heart pounding. She didn't know who pursued him or why, but something in his eyes made her vow to protect him, no matter the cost. As he slipped back into restless sleep, Mira sat by his side, knife in hand, ready to defend the stranger who had stumbled into her life. Mira jolted awake to the sound of rustling leaves and hushed voices outside the cottage. Her grip tightened around the knife as she crept toward the window, peering through a crack in the wooden shutters. Shadows moved swiftly among the trees, figures cloaked in dark animal pelts, their faces painted with crimson stripes. The hunters. Mira's heart hammered as she glanced back at the warrior, his chest rising and falling in fitful sleep. The fever had worsened, sweat glistening on his brow as he muttered in his native tongue. "What do they want from you?" Mira whispered, but his eyes remained closed, fists clenched around the tattered blanket. Outside, the voices grew louder, closer. Mira swallowed hard and moved to the door, pressing her ear against the cold wood. "The warrior can't be far," one of them said, voice rough and filled with menace. "If he's still alive, he'll head east toward the river." Another voice chuckled darkly. "Not if we find him first." Mira's pulse quickened. If they discovered the warrior here, they'd kill them both without hesitation. She hurried back to his side, shaking him gently. "You have to wake up," she urged, her voice a strained whisper. "They're coming for you." His eyelids fluttered open, and he winced, struggling to sit up. "Too weak," he rasped, but Mira shook her head. "I can hide you," she said, already moving toward the floorboards. With frantic fingers, she pried up a loose board, revealing a shallow crawl space. "Get in!" she ordered, her eyes blazing with determination. He hesitated, staring into her eyes as if searching for something. Trust. With a slight nod, he crawled into the space, wincing as the wound reopened. Mira covered him quickly, throwing a rug over the boards just as a fist pounded against the door. "Open up!" The hunters' voices echoed like a death knell. Mira inhaled deeply, steeling herself, and stepped forward, sliding the knife into her waistband. If they discovered the warrior, there would be no mercy, but if they didn't, she still had to find out why he was hunted, and what it had to do with the mark carved into his skin. Mira forced a calm expression as she unlatched the door, her fingers trembling behind her back. The hunters loomed before her, eyes glinting beneath their hoods, the scent of blood and sweat clinging to them like a dark cloud. The leader stepped forward, towering over her with a jagged scar slicing across his jaw. "We're looking for someone," he said, his gaze sweeping the room. Mira squared her shoulders, meeting his stare. "No one's here but me," she replied evenly, praying her voice didn't betray her fear. The man's eyes narrowed, and he shoved past her, bootsteps heavy on the wooden floor. 2 more hunters followed, their eyes roaming over every corner, every shadow. Mira's pulse raced as they neared the rug beneath which the warrior lay hidden. "Livin' alone, huh?" one of them sneered, grabbing Mira's chin, his breath reeking of stale meat. "Not smart for a girl like you." Mira yanked her face away, her jaw clenched. "Leave," she said, her voice a low, dangerous growl. The leader snorted, but before he could reply, a groan echoed from beneath the floorboards. Mira's heart plummeted. The leader's head snapped toward the sound, eyes narrowing. "What was that?" he demanded, stepping closer. Mira forced a laugh, stepping in front of him. "A stray cat," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Big ones come through here sometimes." The man's lip curled, but before he could push her aside, another hunter burst through the door. "Found blood near the riverbank," he announced breathlessly. "Fresh." The leader's eyes darkened, and he shoved Mira aside, glaring at her. "If you're lying, girl, we'll be back," he snarled, yanking the door open. "And next time we won't be so friendly." The hunters filed out, the door slamming behind them with a deafening crash. Mira sagged against the wall, her knees weak. The silence pressed down on her, and she scrambled to the rug, pulling up the floorboards. The warrior lay there, sweat-soaked and shaking, his breathing labored. "They're gone," Mira whispered, her voice breaking. But as she stared down at him, a chilling realization struck her. They hadn't left because they believed her. They'd left to regroup, and they would return with greater numbers and deadlier intentions. Mira helped the warrior out of the crawl space, his body heavy and limp against her as she guided him back to the bed. His eyes fluttered open, glazed with fever, and his lips moved soundlessly, forming words she couldn't understand. "Who are you?" she demanded, grabbing a damp cloth and pressing it against his burning forehead. He winced, teeth gritted, but his gaze finally met hers. "Kelan," he rasped, his voice hoarse and raw, "from the Firehawk tribe." Mira's breath caught. The Firehawks were known for their brutal tactics and relentless raids against neighboring clans, but Kelan didn't look like the ruthless warriors she'd heard about. His eyes were weary, his face haunted. "Why are they hunting you?" she pressed, but he only shook his head, jaw tight. "You shouldn't have helped me," he muttered, his eyes closing. "They'll kill you for it." Mira swallowed, her throat dry. "Why? What did you do?" Keelan's jaw clenched, and he turned his face away, as though battling a memory too painful to speak. "I refused to kill," he finally said, voice breaking. "My brother ordered me to slaughter a village, women, children. I said no." Mira's stomach twisted. "Your brother?" Kelan nodded, eyes darkening. "Chief Razak. He leads the Firehawks now." Mira's blood ran cold. Razak was notorious, his name whispered in fear throughout the region. "So, he sent his men to finish you?" Kelan nodded again, his fists clenched against the blanket. "I am a traitor to my own blood," he said bitterly, "and they will not stop until I am dead." Mira sat back, her mind spinning. She had saved a man condemned by his own tribe, a man marked for death. Outside, the wind howled, and Mira's gaze darted toward the door. The hunters would return, and next time, they wouldn't hesitate to tear her cottage apart. "Then we can't stay here," Mira said firmly, rising to her feet. "We need to move before they come back." Kelan shook his head, eyes pleading. "I can't run," he said, his face twisted in pain. "Not like this." Mira's jaw tightened, a resolve hardening inside her. "Then I'll fight," she declared, grabbing her father's old bow from the wall. "If they want you, they'll have to get through me first." Mira crouched behind the overturned table, her bowstring taut as she aimed toward the door. Kelan lay motionless on the bed, his breaths shallow, eyes closed. Outside, the sound of crunching leaves grew louder, voices mingling in low, urgent tones. Mira's heart hammered, every muscle coiled like a drawn bow. The first hunter burst through the door, eyes wild, axe raised. Mira released the arrow, and it sliced through the air, embedding itself in his shoulder. He roared in pain, staggering back as another hunter lunged forward, spear aimed at her chest. Mira rolled to the side, the spearhead slamming into the wall, splintering wood. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed a second arrow, and aimed, but the leader grabbed her wrist, wrenching her arm behind her back. "You lied to us," he snarled, his breath hot against her ear. Mira struggled, but his grip was iron. "Where is he?" he demanded, yanking her head back. Mira gritted her teeth, eyes blazing. "You'll never find him!" The leader's lip curled, and he slammed her to the ground, the world spinning as pain shot through her skull. "Search the house," he barked, and the hunters scattered, overturning chairs, tearing through cabinets. Mira's vision blurred, but she forced herself to crawl toward the bed, where Kelan still lay unmoving. "Kelan," she rasped, shaking his arm, "wake up." But his eyes remained closed, his skin pale and clammy. The leader crouched beside her, grabbing a fistful of her hair, yanking her head back. "Where is the traitor?" he growled, eyes burning. Mira met his glare, jaw clenched. "Gone," she spat, blood dripping from her split lip. The leader's face twisted in fury, and he raised his fist. But before he could strike, a knife whizzed through the air, sinking into his neck with a sickening thud. The leader's eyes bulged, and he collapsed, gurgling, as the remaining hunters whirled around to see Kelan standing behind them, eyes blazing, blood-soaked knife clutched in his trembling hand. "Enough!" Kelan rasped, staggering forward, muscles quaking as he leveled the blade at them. The hunters hesitated, eyes darting between their fallen leader and the bloodied warrior who refused to die. Mira pushed herself to her knees, chest heaving as she met Kelan's fierce gaze. "We need to run," he said, voice raw but determined. "Now." Mira threw open the back door, the cold night air biting against her skin as she and Kelan stumbled into the dense forest. Behind them, the cries of the remaining hunters echoed through the night, a pack of wolves closing in. "This way," Mira whispered, gripping Kelan's arm as he staggered, his legs barely holding him up. Blood dripped from his reopened wound, staining the ground with every step. "I can't keep up," Kelan gasped, leaning heavily against her. Mira's jaw clenched, muscles straining as she pulled his arm over her shoulder, dragging him through the underbrush. Branches clawed at her face, roots snagging her feet. But she pressed on, eyes fixed on the faint glow of the moon breaking through the treetops. "Just a little farther," she urged, but Kelan's knees buckled and he crashed to the ground, breath coming in ragged gasps. Mira knelt beside him, panic rising as she pressed her hand against his wound, trying to stem the flow of blood. "Stay with me," she said, her voice shaking. "If we stop, they'll find us." Kelan's eyes fluttered open, dark and haunted. "You should go," he rasped, fingers weakly clutching her wrist. "They won't kill you. Just me." Mira shook her head fiercely, tears stinging her eyes. "No," she said, her voice fierce. "You're not dying here." Before Kelan could protest, the sound of snapping branches echoed behind them, followed by the hunters' shouts. Mira's heart pounded, and she scanned the area frantically. There, a thicket of brambles thick and dense, its thorns sharp as knives. "In there," she said, grabbing Kelan's arm and half-carrying, half-dragging him into the tangle of branches. Thorns tore at their clothes and skin, but they pressed deeper, Mira biting back a cry as a branch slashed her cheek. They crouched low, breaths shallow, as the hunter's footsteps grew louder. Closer. "He couldn't have gone far," one of them snarled, his shadow passing mere inches from their hiding place. Mira pressed her hand over Kelan's mouth, her own breath frozen in her throat. The hunters paused, eyes scanning the darkness, weapons glinting in the moonlight. Mira's heart thundered, every muscle tense. If they so much as breathed too loud, it would all be over. Mira's pulse roared in her ears as the hunters' shadows loomed closer, their voices a low, menacing murmur. Kelan's breaths were shallow, his body trembling against her. Mira tightened her grip on the knife, every muscle coiled, ready to strike if they were discovered. "They're bleeding," one hunter muttered, crouching to inspect a blood-soaked leaf. "They can't be far." Another hunter grunted, eyes scanning the bramble thicket. "Search every inch. Chief Razak wants his brother's head." Mira's breath hitched. The chief himself was hunting them now. Kelan's jaw clenched, his eyes heavy-lidded but fierce. "Mira," he whispered, voice so faint it was barely a breath. "Leave me. You can still escape." Mira shook her head, her nails digging into his arm. "Not a chance," she hissed, her gaze fixed on the hunters as they moved closer. One of them drew a sword, slashing through the underbrush, each strike sending branches flying. Mira tensed, eyes darting around for a way out, but they were surrounded. The nearest hunter stepped forward, his boot crunching a twig mere inches from Mira's foot. Kelan's hand tightened around the hilt of his knife, preparing to lunge, but Mira pressed her hand against his chest, holding him back. She had one chance. Mira grabbed a stone, aimed high, and hurled it deep into the woods. It struck a tree with a resounding crack, and every hunter's head snapped toward the sound. "There!" the lead hunter shouted, and they surged forward, weapons drawn, crashing through the trees in the opposite direction. Mira exhaled shakily, her body sagging against Kelan. "We need to move," she whispered, but Kelan's eyes were glassy, his skin clammy beneath her touch. "Kelan," she shook him, fear tightening her throat. His eyes flickered open, his lips cracked and bleeding. "Razak," he rasped, his gaze unfocused. "He'll kill everyone, not just me." Mira's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Kelan swallowed, a tear slipping down his cheek. "If I don't return, he'll burn the villages, slaughter them all, women, children." Mira's heart hammered, her mind spinning. Razak wasn't just after his brother. He was planning a massacre. And Mira was the only one who could stop it. "Then we're not running anymore," she said, jaw set, eyes blazing. "We're going to stop him." Mira tightened the bandage around Kelan's waist, her hands steady despite the storm raging inside her. The fire crackled between them, casting wavering shadows across Kelan's hollowed face. "You can't fight him like this," she said, her voice hard but laced with fear. Kelan winced, jaw clenched, sweat slicking his brow. "I have to," he muttered, pushing himself upright. "Razak won't stop. He'll burn every village until he finds me." Mira's fists clenched in her lap. "Then let's make sure he finds you," she said, eyes fierce. Kelan's gaze snapped to hers, confusion flashing across his features. "What are you saying?" Mira stood, grabbing her father's old hunting bow and slinging it over her shoulder. "We draw him out," she said, pacing the small clearing. "Let him think he's got you cornered, but we choose the ground. We set the trap." Keelan's eyes darkened, a flicker of hope igniting. "A trap," he repeated, as though tasting the word for the first time. "What kind of trap?" Mira met his gaze, her jaw set. "We lure him to the gorge," she said, nodding toward the cliff's edge visible through the trees. "The only way through is the rope bridge, if we can get him and his men onto it." Keelan's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. "Then we cut it," he finished, his voice grim. Mira nodded, her heart pounding. "But it has to look real. He has to believe you're too weak to fight." Keelan's mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "That part won't be hard." Mira crouched in front of him, her hands gripping his shoulders. "Can you do this?" she asked, her eyes searching his. Kelan swallowed, his expression raw, vulnerable. "I can," he said, voice firm. "But Mira, if it doesn't work—" "It will," she interrupted, her eyes fierce. "It has to." Kelan held her gaze, something unspoken passing between them, a silent promise forged in fire. Then, with a deep breath, he nodded. "Then let's end this," he said, pushing himself to his feet, swaying but determined. Mira slipped her arm around his waist, steadying him as they moved toward the gorge. The wind howled through the trees, a harbinger of the battle to come. They had one shot, one chance to end Razak's reign, and Mira was willing to risk everything to see it through. Mira crouched behind a boulder, her breath fogging in the icy air as she watched Razak and his men approach the rope bridge. Kelan stood at the center of the swaying bridge, leaning heavily on a wooden staff, his face ashen but eyes blazing with defiance. Razak halted at the edge, his dark eyes locking onto his brother. "You should have stayed dead, Kelan," Razak sneered, his voice carrying over the wind. Behind him, a dozen warriors armed with spears and bows fanned out, eyes gleaming with bloodlust. Kelan gripped the staff tighter, legs quaking beneath him. "I never wanted this, Razak," he called back, voice strong despite the pain. "But you left me no choice." Razak's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You were always weak," he spat, drawing his sword. "And now you die a coward's death." Razak stepped onto the bridge, the wooden planks creaking beneath his boots. Behind him, his men followed, their footfalls heavy and ominous. Mira's heart raced as she crouched lower, her hand wrapped around the frayed rope tied to the bridge's support beam. If she cut it too soon, Kelan would fall with them. If she waited too long, Razak would reach him. "Kelan!" she shouted, and his eyes met hers for a brief, searing moment. Kelan nodded, then dropped the staff and straightened, legs trembling but unyielding. "You want me, Razak?" he said, voice rising. "Come and get me!" Razak snarled, lunging forward, sword swinging. Kelan sidestepped, the blade missing him by inches. Behind Razak, his men surged forward, the bridge straining under their weight. Mira's pulse pounded as she saw the rope fraying, fibers snapping one by one. "Now, Mira!" Kelan shouted. Mira gritted her teeth and slashed the rope with all her strength. The beam splintered, the bridge lurched, and Razak's men screamed as the planks gave way, plunging them into the gorge below. Razak's eyes widened, his hand shooting out to grab a loose rope. Kelan staggered, arms flailing, and Mira leaped forward, catching his wrist just as he slipped over the edge. "Hold on!" she cried, her feet digging into the dirt, muscles straining. Below them, Razak dangled by one arm, eyes blazing with hatred. "Kelan!" he roared, his other hand reaching for a knife. "If I die, you're coming with me." Mira's muscles burned as she held Keelan's wrist, her feet sliding inch by inch toward the cliff's edge. Below, Razak dangled from the rope, his eyes blazing with fury as he struggled to pull himself up. "Kelan!" Razak snarled, his knife slashing through the air as he swung closer. "You betrayed me! You betrayed your own blood!" Keelan's grip on Mira's hand was slipping, his eyes dark with exhaustion. "Mira, let go," he gasped, his voice raw. "Save yourself." Mira's jaw clenched, tears stinging her eyes as her fingers dug deeper into his wrist. "No!" she shouted, her voice fierce. "You said you'd fight. So fight." Keelan's jaw tightened, and with a guttural roar, he reached up with his free hand, grasping the ledge with bloodied fingers. Mira leaned back, planting her feet, and hauled him up with every ounce of strength she had left. Kelan tumbled onto solid ground, chest heaving as he lay there, staring up at the stormy sky. "It's over," Mira whispered, collapsing beside him. But it wasn't. Below them, Razak grunted, his grip slipping as the rope frayed further, strands snapping one by one. "Kelan!" he bellowed, eyes wide and desperate. "Help me!" Kelan rolled onto his knees, breathing hard, and crawled to the edge. Mira's hand shot out, gripping his arm. "Don't," she said, her eyes dark. "He'll kill you." Kelan met her gaze, his face a mask of torment. "He's still my brother." With a grimace, he leaned over, extending his hand toward Razak. "Take my hand," he shouted, voice breaking. Razak's eyes locked onto Keelan's, a spark of hope flickering, then twisting into a sinister grin. In one swift motion, Razak grabbed Keelan's arm and yanked him down, the knife flashing in his other hand. "No!" Mira screamed, lunging forward, but Kelan was ready. With a final surge of strength, he drove his knee into Razak's wrist, sending the knife spiraling into the abyss. "You've lost, Razak," Kelan said, his voice hard as stone. Razak's eyes widened, and then the rope snapped. Razak's scream echoed through the gorge as he plummeted into the depths below, his shadow swallowed by the churning river. Kelan collapsed back onto the ground, chest heaving, eyes empty. Mira pulled him close, her arms wrapping around him as they both trembled, the wind howling through the trees. "It's over," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "You're free now." And in that moment, as dawn broke over the horizon, the warrior and his savior finally breathed as one.